Yeah, and then this gets back to Clay. Again, a lot of the Clayton
Yeah.
Christensen stuff. It's just Figma. Has hardcore designers using it, and hardcore designers are probably not going to be satisfied with Claude Code yet. But everyone else who uses Figma is perfectly happy with Claude Design.
Okay, Harry, episode 5 of the Future Proof podcast. So it's Sunday morning. It's beautiful in California. It looks like it's nice for you.
It's overcast and 50, but we'll take that for nice in New England. And this is the New England second winter, late winter, early spring, I guess. We'll take it.
I just I remember living in Manhattan, and I kind of have vague memories of looking at an April or May day and looking like it's a Southern California morning, and you walk out and it's like 40 degrees and you're like, this is not LA. Oh.
Yeah. We went to walk our dog this morning and there was some guy in shorts and a t-shirt, and we thought, did we miss something? Did we miss the memo because we're wearing coats and hats?
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, that guy froze, and we were just fine because it was like 45 degrees and like spitting rain out. So
yeah.
But yeah, look, it's end of another week. It's been a pretty big week.
I mean, it's been one of these weeks, at least in the AI tech space, where it like, I don't know, it's just so much. So like, I think that in our prep, we wanted to kind of cover, like in our prep, we kind of wanted to bring our listeners through 3 distinct sort of lenses of what's going on. And you'd wrote the fog of war, and then we're going to move to allocation of capital inside the fog of war, and then what we think distribution means to all this. So let's just start, because I have some semi-spicy takes on the fog of war. But what do we mean by fog of war, and where are we at? Because
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, if you've never seen the movie The Fog of War about the Vietnam War, it is spectacular, and it really gives you a good sense as to actually what we're talking about, which is making decisions under uncertainty, understanding that you don't see everything and don't know anything, or don't know everything, and that what we're dealing with is a variety of, I'm going to say, timelines. So, they always said that the advantage that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger had was that they had a holding period of forever, whereas everyone else had to get mark to market. So if you think about what's gone on in AI this week, what we've seen is a ton of product releases. Last week it was all Opus 4.7, and this week it's, ChatGPT 5.5.
Which I think are, like, just to interrupt you, it's really great that they're releasing those, but I don't see those as like, those are like, okay, hey, each model got significantly brighter as they've gotten more trained in a certain area, but it certainly creates fog.
Yeah. I mean, look, you had OpenAI, release its image model, which is supposedly the best image model. Sergey Brin unretired, Tim Cook stepped down.
Yeah.
And then, Mythos, which was, really the story in the last, week or so, somehow got out. The Pentagon blacklisted it, but the NSA said, you know what, it's a pretty good product. I think we'll use it to crack some more codes. It's a lot of stuff. And I think that if you're in the business of producing AI podcasts, or you're in the business of producing AI newsletters, or you're actually in the business of producing press releases, everything is, an existential threat. Everything needs to be looked at and analyzed and parsed and shouted about at your highest volume, all caps, all the time, because that's your business model. And, and we're guys who are producing, the same stuff. Although we try to take, I think, a little bit more laid back view of that. And if you are in the money raising business, which, Anthropic is in the money raising business, OpenAI certainly in the money raising business, you have to do the same thing. There has to be new, fresh meat for people every day so that you're constantly on people's mind. But the truth,
I'm going to interrupt you there. I think this goes to our distribution point down in our podcast, but you just nailed it. It's like, if you are not in the feed, you're invisible. Even if you have second parties and third parties all talking about you, it's like they need new stuff to talk about. So you just need to keep feeding them. And that kind of creates the fog. But then at the bottom of the funnel is distribution. So everyone needs to be constantly in each other's feeds, or you become invisible.
Right. And the fog, in my mind, refers to the fact that you have a whole group of people who are making real opinions and putting out real proclamations about these products when you're just releasing them, and other people are going to build upon them over the next, 6 weeks to, 18 months, and you don't really quite know what's going to happen with those. And quite frankly, you don't know what the results of them are going to be for the next 3 to 5 years. And when you think about it in that regard, it is really hard to make proclamations like this is the greatest model ever when the next model is going to drop next week and it's going
Yeah.
to be the greatest model ever. You can go back and forth on all of these things and realize that what people were very excited about. I mean, look, go back to when Sora came out, and Sora was like the greatest thing on earth. And there was a gated, opening, and like you had to beg someone to get a code so
Yeah.
that you can get on
This
it.
is
And now
the
it's
video. This is the video thing that
yeah, this is
yeah,
OpenAI's video thing, and now all of a sudden
it's
it's shut
gone.
down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it went from the hottest thing on earth to shut down within months. And so
Not to mention maybe $1 billion spent in compute.
yeah, I mean, look, we wrote favorably about Opus 4.7 last week. We walked it back and call it a gaslightus. Uh, 3 days later, Mythos was a weapon. Now it's sort of a joke in terms of its in terms of its safety. Like you can flip flop and go back and forth on these things within a week, uh, and be right the whole time. Like they every comment you make on them can be right, but it's just changing so fast. And it was interesting. I wrote a piece about a tiki bar on Friday, because I had gone to a really great tiki event at our local tiki bar on Thursday night, and tiki something I love. And as you sat there and talked to the tiki fanatics about rums and the history of drinks, and talked to Martin Cate, who is one of the preeminent tiki guys who runs Smuggler's Cove out in San Francisco, you realize that like there's no talk of AI.
None.
There's guys talking about carving wood and making lights, and the sugar content of rum, or whether they're aging it in what kind of barrels, and you're talking about how you can't make a 17-year rum anymore because if you age it in Jamaica, you're going to lose 60% of the barrel, and it's just too expensive to do. And um, it's just a very, I guess, refreshing and different conversation from the everyday hype that you get if you spend all your time thinking about and talking about and writing about the AI business.
Exactly. I mean, actually, normal people just go, "Oh, yeah, that AI stuff." Like, they have a little like when you talk to normal people, their opinion of it is suspect, and some are like, "Oh yeah, I totally use it." Like, but it's not, it's not Nirvana. It's not like, the best band in the world, whereas the insiders are really sort of just, drunk and delirious with it if you go to San Francisco. But I've seen that trend before too, because during the first internet boom, like, if you were around people like me that were like web developers, like all we could think about is web development. And I realized like, oh, when it became popular, I literally got offended. I was like, what do you guys weren't even here when it was, and you know what I mean? And I think that's what we're in the
You're
precursor.
an indie band fan,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like as soon as they make it, yeah, these
Yeah,
guys they sold out.
exactly. No, but I think that's where we're at right now, and I think, for businesses, we talk about the seriousness of getting involved, and I think this moves us to allocation, but there is a lot going on. It probably is confusing. At the same time, if it's confusing, the natural approach from a capital allocation standpoint could be like, "Hey, something? This is nuts. We're just like, we'll look at this next year, or we won't do anything because it's too confusing." And I think that's wrong. There is a lot of signal that is being produced, and the signal is the models are quite capable. They're quite capable.
More capable than anyone can use,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, exactly. And they were quite capable 6 months ago. And today they're just slightly more capable, and they're getting some really significant tooling around it. And if you're a capital allocator, you need to kind of like really kind of avoid all the excitement and hype and fear, and just sit down and ask your business. And this is where I think you do need professional help, and say, what can these things do now? And what can they do? What can we bet on they could do in like 15, 20 months?
Yeah. It's funny, I played golf with some guys the other day, and one of the guys is a lawyer, and he's got a sort of a data business around the law, and he was asking how we did what we did. And so I explained what we do, how we take in sources, how we analyze those sources, score them, come up with themes, write about them, et cetera. And I said, look, at the end of the day, what we're doing is content marketing. We're building authority in a space using content. And he said, we try to do this, but it's really hard. I said, yes, I know. It's really hard. I understand it. Because I do it every day. But I asked him how he was doing it, and he was like, "Well, we sort of try to come up with some themes ourselves, and then we use Jasper to help write."
Yeah, that's
And I said, "Well, I said that's I said that's fine, but that's probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago."
is literally it really is. It really
And
is. It's
and
okay though. It's good that he's doing that.
yeah, it is good that he's doing it, but it sort of brought it back to me that, oh, here's a smart guy, but he's a year and a half, 2 years behind because he works at a law firm, right? And they're not
Yeah.
and they're not going to be on the bleeding edge or the cutting edge of AI. And I said, look, and this guy's name's Josh. I said, Josh, happy to come in and talk with whoever's doing this and explain what we do. And because I think what we do it for AI, but we can do it, like I said, we can do it for anything.
Well, I think what we've done and what we continue to become better at is understanding exactly how the machine works, the machine, how we want to tune it and make it do the things that we want. And I
Yeah.
feel like when you're further away from it, it's harder. And so I think that's where people are intrigued on what we do and why we do it. And we talk about building a harness and all that jazz. It's a little technical, a little hypey too. But essentially you do all these things are purpose built. Like a supply chain is very purpose built. And if you kind of don't know how the tools work, it's hard to be that purpose built. So you end up using something that's a little clunky, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, before we get into the allocation thing, I wanted to comment on something you said. You talked about how the tools themselves are getting more sort of tooling around them,
Mhm.
and adding more capabilities. And I think actually one of the better takes of the week comes from a guy named Nate
Yeah,
who puts out a
he's he's
tech
good. We
newsletter
like
on
him.
Substack, a former
Yeah.
AWS guy, really really technically sound guy. I can't even discuss half the shit that he talks about just because he lives it. But I think what the best take of the week I saw from anybody else was Nate talking about how Claude adding design was simply adding more it wasn't about killing Figma. It was actually sort of going full stack on programming effectively. So you were
Yeah.
able to then, because that handed off to Claude Code and Claude, and you were actually going to get to the point where you could actually create full companies and full products as a user. And again, it wasn't about killing Figma or anything else or Canva. It was actually really just all about kind of going full stack. And I think you saw that when you start to dig into the specs and the capabilities of what OpenAI just released. It's kind of the same thing, the way they're actually rendering and creating their images now. It's something that's going to be able to, you're going to be able to take it and just dump it straight into Codex, and it's
Yeah.
just it's all going to be super super clean. And we didn't write about it, and I'm gonna pull out my phone and put it in front of my face here for a second, and because I definitely bookmarked this thing on Twitter this week. X. I can't.
Yeah.
It's hard when you called it Twitter forever,
It's
but there
easier to say Twitter than it is X because
it
X
is.
just seems so.
There was a company that kind of blew up on X, Twitter, this week. That was a company called Flipbook, and it's all
I mean, Flipbook
rendered
is it?
in code. It's not images and stuff like that. But if you watch the video on a company called Flipbook,
Is it the old Flipbook or is this a?
no, that's Flipboard.
Okay, I didn't catch this story, dude.
We didn't write about it. We didn't talk about it. But if you look at the imagery coming out of it, um, and you sort of discuss something, and everything is clickable, and it renders everything on the fly in
Oh, I know what you're talking about. This is yeah, it's not rendered in HTML. It's like
right. Correct.
it's almost like an interactive game engine. I did look at this and I
Yes.
thought I did look at this and I thought this is quite interesting. But kind of going back to like we're drifting here and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think our
Yeah.
listeners are probably like, what the hell are these guys talking about? We're down the rabbit hole. I would say you mentioned a couple of things. Let's go back to capital allocation. I think that just to understand, you brought it back to saying I mentioned that the models on themselves are getting some more tooling, and then you mentioned Figma, and this goes to the capital allocation kind of story. Figma's on the wrong side of the equation right now because they started at a period where the creator, the actual designer, was building using the tool to build boxes of information and looking at the flow, and they made that very friendly for the design community. I used it. I still use it. And it gave developers a handoff spot. So the developer would look at it and be like, okay, I understand it. I could see some pseudocode. I could see what you were kind of doing. But that's all part of the theater of design and engineering partnerships. That's kind of already eroded, and I feel like Fit and Claude Code folks are just sort of saying, "Hey, if you we've already rendered it. We already have the code. Like, what are we doing this for?" So that's natural. And I think that if I'm a capital allocator and looking at how Figma's business is going to grow, if they don't substantially move and say, "Hey, listen, our community of designers, their whole world has shifted." And you talked about this at the prep. My skills as a person providing skills to this company just changed so drastically. You got to reallocate.
Yeah, and then this gets back to again, a lot of the Clayton
Yeah.
Christensen stuff. It's just Figma, has hardcore designers using it, and hardcore designers are probably not going to be satisfied with Claude Code yet. But everyone else who uses Figma is perfectly happy with Claude Design. I did a couple things on Claude Design this week. To me, shockingly amazing, like fantastic, because
Yeah.
I'm not a designer. I'm terrible at it, but all of a sudden, I look like a damn genius.
Yeah, no, but that's like literally like there's only like a million great designers on planet Earth, right? And Figma made those million. They made 400,000 of them amazing. They built design systems, and that's all really set great. But the rest of the world are not good designers, and where Figma was missing, it was like they're super servicing the top, but the world needed design, right? So it's just, and that's that is the that is exactly what we're trying to tell business users right now. A publicly traded company has a great product for its group, but the rest of the world wants to do it. And who's doing that? And so the AI systems are going to attack that. So your capital allocation business is under threat if you're
Yes.
not thinking about that.
Yeah. So let's talk about capital allocation, right? I would argue, and I don't even know that it's an argument because it's just a truthful statement. Every time you allocate capital, whether it's time or money, you are making decisions under some form of uncertainty. And actually, oddly enough, right after that tiki bar visit, I turned on the TV as I was writing the piece, and on pops The Wolf of Wall Street, and Matthew McConaughey's on going, oh, you know, but he said something which really hit me at the time. He said, "Look, number one rule of Wall Street: nobody, and I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or
The
Jimmy
best.
Buffett,
That's the best line.
knows if the stock's going up, down, sideways, or in
Yeah.
fucking circles."
Yeah.
And the guy should have won a supporting
should.
actor Academy Award. It
Yeah.
literally is one of the greatest 5 minutes of film ever. And this guy at the time, you're talking about 1987, and you're talking about large cap growth stocks. He's talking about painting the tape with 3,000 shares of Microsoft. Right now, let's run that back and look at the risk curve today, 40 years later, and look at startups. I mean, I've met a lot of the best VCs in the business. You've met a lot of the best VCs in the business. We've both been in that business. These are extremely smart people. They're extremely thoughtful, and they're extremely well connected. And I would argue that none of them know either. That the pattern recognition that they talk about is all post ante. That, you
I
sort
think
of,
they have to be doing it. I think you lose your touch. I think a lot of VCs came up because they were actually product people or engineers, and they were like, they got the wave, they got an exit, and then the VC community says, "Hey, since you did that, we're going to bring you in." But I think the pattern matching skills at a macro level are quite still strong. But if you're not on the keyboard doing this stuff as deeply as we are, you're losing your skill because it's like it's a different game. I'll use a surfing analogy. It's a different break. It's a different wave, and you need a different board.
yeah. And if I go to the surfing analogy, let's just say that the sets were historically, 3 minutes apart, and now they're 3 seconds apart.
Yeah, and it's a fast wave. It's a fast wave. You got to be.
Everything is compressed, right? So
Yeah.
it used to be that you needed a couple $1 million, you needed a technical co-founder, you needed engineering team, you needed all that to start a company. And then it got down to, a famous, Paul Graham, conversation where he says, you need $100,000 and access to AWS, and you can start a company. And now the answer is, it's $400 a month, $500 a month gets you every tool you need to start a company. And so what does that mean when the cycle gets compressed? It means that you ask the question of the market, you have an idea, you build it, you put it out in the market, you ask the question, can I get someone to buy this? Will someone care about this? And if yes, great, you keep going. If no, you stop and you move on to the next idea and the next idea and the next idea. And for a very small amount of money as an investor, someone can take 50 swings at bat when before they could take 5 before they ran out of money. And
Yeah,
that actually sounds exciting if you're an investor. You're like, okay, so I'm going to give smart people 50 shots instead of 5. And then the problem though is that everybody gets 50 shots. And so the issue, the moat, is not about building something that's great or building something insanely great or building something that really cuts through. It's like it's cutting through. It's getting past the other 49 people who are who are building the same thing. Capital is not the bottleneck. The distribution part is, and we're going to get to that. There was something that blew up on X this week, and it was a story about a woman at USAID. And she was making $272,000 a year. She was a VP. She'd spent her life in the NGO business. And now she's on there talking and complaining about the fact that she can't get a job, which is, of course, a tragedy as a human story, as as an individual. But the amount of, I would say, schadenfreude that appeared, and just the glee that appeared on X would also tell you a little bit about the country and what people think, which is simply that this was effectively a government employee who was getting paid almost $300,000 a year when everyone else out here is grinding away for a lot less and not making it. And all of a sudden, once that whole edifice collapses, you realize that none of the skills that she has are transferable. So she's not going to make 90 grand as a bartender. She's going to make 30 grand as a bartender if she's lucky, because there's lots of people who want to be bartenders.
well, you're a crappy bartender if you're not making 90K.
I
I was a bartender. I think I made more than 30, not on the W-2, but on tip. But yeah, I get your point. We get your point.
so so it's really interesting, and I think that what you're seeing is you're starting to see the beginnings of some of this, where there's just layoff after layoff after layoff. And they're blaming it on AI. Some of it's AI, some of it's we just overbuilt, some of it is definitively job replacement. But I can tell you that capitalism is all about, and I'll let you finish the sentence. What is capitalism all about?
It favors efficiency, period.
Correct. Right. And so I may not want to fire you if I'm the boss, but if you're making $272,000 and I can get an agent to do it for $50 a month, you're fired.
Well,
It's just going to happen, right?
and let's pause there for a second, because I think that's mostly right. And I think if you're the CEO, you need to be thinking about a lot of things like culture and all these things, because most Americans don't really like AI, or it's just all like it's the boogeyman, right? And so you need to have a cult. You need to, if you're the CEO, you're firing people because you want efficiency, but you're also hiring because you want efficiency. And if you have a bunch of people that don't want to take more shots on goal, that doesn't understand that the game is a full court press right now.
Yeah, game changed.
You're just like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't need those people in my company, right? And your company also needs to operate differently. It still needs to make quality products, but it also needs to understand it probably owns its own distribution that they don't understand. Not necessarily physical, but like their communications distribution. Everything's running at like at a way that it used to be. And so you need to get rid of the person you're paying $275 to, and replace them with a person that you might want to pay $320 to, but knows how to play the game that's currently being played, period.
Right. Yeah.
And so
that 320 person will be doing 6x the output of the 272 person, and that's the only reason you hire them at 320.
yeah,
right?
yeah. Even if by the way, I'd argue the reason why you're getting rid of that person at 270 is they're doing 0.5x, and I would hire a person a little bit more and pay them if they're playing the game at 1.5x. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's I guess the point is that there's a fear of AI, as you say, because it's coming for your job, it's coming for your livelihood, it's coming for your way of life to some degree, and the concentration of wealth in AI is like nothing we've ever seen. It is all flowing to the top 10 companies. Cursor didn't exist a couple years ago, and it just got taken over effectively for $60 billion. Anthropic, OpenAI, all these guys. There's a reason Elon's worth almost $1 trillion. And I think, Elon, being the guy who was behind Doge and being a smart guy, and being a capitalist in the extreme, started coming out and talking about universal high income this week.
Yeah, what is that
Not
about?
not 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 basic income, universal high income. And
That makes no friggin' sense.
well, I think, it gets back to the AI argument about abundance, but realistically, if you're thinking about it the way I am, I think it's political insurance. I think he knows, like most of these guys know, that the only thing that will stop AI from reaching its ultimate endpoint of firing most everybody is
I don't agree with that. I still think, you know, you're
it's coming, baby. It's coming.
well, no, we're both on the point that disruption's coming. I don't want you to lose your
Yes.
train of thought. Let's just
Yeah,
keep
no.
going.
Well, so it's not firing everybody,
Yeah.
but let's just say that unemployment goes from 4% to 10%. So, that's not everybody.
Well, it's the where the unemployment might arrive is in a very unique and a space that hasn't had that before. Yeah, if you're in the lower echelons or you're kind of just like decided to do your own thing and not become professional and you're essentially economically irrelevant, like this is not going to change anything for you. It's really affecting, hey, I played the game right. I went to college, I got a job in corporate America, like I'm a functionary.
I make $272,000 a year and
Yeah,
now I make nothing. Yeah.
yeah, that is
Yeah.
scary for that class of people, and I
It,
and I and I
it,
sympathize with them, but I don't wanna pay them 275 to do nothing.
no, of course not. But here's the thing. Their vote counts as much as the guy who pumps gas.
Yeah, yeah, I which is great.
And they're going to be worried about this. They're going to be pissed off about this. And when you're worried and pissed off, ultimately you end up on the picket line saying that we should tax the billionaires.
That's the
And
government. That's where you're saying this is
yeah,
where your set your claim, and I think it's probably well founded with our listeners, is that that's gonna be that's gonna make AI slow down.
well, the
Or
government,
technology. Just say technology. It's not
yeah,
just AI, it's just
the
technology.
government can slow down technology, and the government can do. Look, you saw it with the Pentagon, right? They threatened to turn Anthropic into a pariah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it here in Los Angeles where we have a city council that continues to want to express a defunding of the police. And when you kind of read that carefully, and if you read it, you're just like, okay, but like that means that by that's going to actually increase crime. That's not going to do much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that the people on your city council actually are perfectly happy with that because
No, I agree, but I'm just saying,
crime is happening to
but
somebody else.
yeah, but the thing is that when you say defund the police and crime is okay, you're saying people are voting for that. That's why those people are there. They got voted in. If you vote in a class of people that are saying, I want to defund or slow technology, you could end up with the same sort of craziness of saying, we want to defund technology. And I think that's your point that,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think
yeah.
that's alarming.
Look, it's very hard to make the argument that capitalism is bad and we should have socialism. Billionaires shouldn't exist. Income over a certain dollar amount shouldn't exist. And at the same time, go out on the picket lines with your slogans and say we should tax these people more, all of which makes sense in a twisted way to the people yelling it. But then you get down to the hard facts that the people who are making $272,000 or more are paying 70% of the taxes in America, which are then trickling down or being directly distributed. They don't trickle; they get directly distributed down to the people at the 50% of people who don't pay any federal taxes in services every year. So those are just facts. I'm not debating the morality of it or anything. We already have a pretty progressive tax code. And so if you're trying to kill the thing that's actually paying for you, then sooner or later you have to ask where's the universal high income coming from if you've already gotten rid of
I,
the people who are actually producing the goods, and then you get into a problem. So I think what Elon is basically saying is that there will be an abundance that comes from AI and robotics and all this stuff, and we're going to redistribute a lot of that so that people have enough to live happily, and their lives are going to have to change from grinding it out to figuring out what to do with their time
I
because
think
they
that,
don't have to grind it out anymore.
yeah,
Sort of a utopian view,
it's,
but to me it's political. It's just political insurance.
yeah, I think what we're getting back to is like if all of the claims of how this AI technology is going to get deployed in corporate America just magic wand automatically gets exactly where it needs to be, which it Never has. Like, no technology prior to that has brought corporations to a place where they run perfectly. It's a wild claim. The abundance claim, I think, is a wild claim. I don't believe it. As a technologist, as a person has to like make technology work, you just know it's clunky. It's clunky, but big things can get done. And I think it's going to create job displacement, which puts still kind of, we're in our distribution segment here, is like, it's going to create the demand. The capital allocator is going to have to work differently. The compression is going to happen on the market, meaning people that don't know how to do the things that they need to do are going to get compressed out. People that know how to do what needs to be done are going to get more valuable. At the end of the day, though, if you don't understand how to be found, discovered, which means distribution, your value is going to be, distribution is going to have more value, not less value,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Period. Just period. And that's what's interesting. And who are the big distributors right now? Apple distributes, the phone is in everyone's hand, right? Let's just argue that. Google, Meta's pretty much in your life, whether you like it or not. And Google's in your life no matter what.
Right.
Those and
I
TikTok.
mean, we wrote a piece this week, and we went through it, right? Google has 6 products with a billion plus, MAUs, like, monthly users, a billion plus installs.
Right.
And then they rent the iPhone, right? Which has something like 1.3 billion or 1.5 billion, phones out there, something like that. And by the way, Google has all the other phones, right? For the most
Yeah.
part.
So they
Within
own distribute. They are literally the roads, the railway, the ocean, and the air travel. Like, you're on them no matter what.
right.
And inside there, everyone's trying to carve out their own distribution. And I think our point about distribution is, if you don't own a better part of your distribution, you become irrelevant. And I think you rightfully put in our prep document that VCs that used to claim that they are great guys and they have great contacts wasn't good enough. And you look at sort of where A16 is they built a media company, direct to consumer, direct to founder, direct, for 2 reasons. They knew that distribution was going to be important, but they also they wanted to control their own story.
Correct.
They didn't want the media like New York Times or The Atlantic or Wired to essentially tell their story or tell their companies that they fund. They didn't want to be reliant on that distribution, so they built it themselves. And their distribution channel is more valuable than, frankly, Condé Nast's, period.
Yeah, and I think, Andreessen and Horowitz are both, on record as saying that they took the old CAA model, the
Yeah,
Mike Ovitz CAA model.
Exactly. It's smart.
And
Just
that's what they were
pure
going to
smart.
do. It's genius. It's the best move, I think, in VC.
But
So
but that could be used at every level of every company. Your friend's law firm, your friend's
Yep.
PE company. It's like, where are you doing your distribution? By the way, distribution is still hard. AI doesn't change how you earn distribution. It means that you have to be building distribution to direct. And again, we talk to companies and we talk to founders, and I go, what are you doing in your distribution? Like, how are you doing it? And it's the classic, oh, we're hiring a PR firm and blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, that's what you did in the 1905. You know what I mean? Not 2026, 27. It's just ridiculous how plain Jane people think.
question is, are you going to build it organically, which takes time, effort, money, and low to no returns for a long period of time, or are you going to rent distribution, which
You need to
is
do both. You
yeah,
know that.
I
It's
know.
both.
It's a rhetorical question,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, if I am a founder today starting a company, and I think it really depends on what I'm in, what's my passion, where am I attacking? It could be that I really am passionate about the legal services business and I'm Harvey, right? That's a very different conversation than if I am a consumer product, or I'm a new video game or something like that. But I'm going to look and I'm going to say, who do I want to take money from? Like, where are the guys that I want to talk to? And I would argue that, like Google gives you distribution. Microsoft, if you're in the software business toward the enterprise, gives you distribution. Salesforce is all over that.
Amazon's a really interesting distribution company. As soon as I've been here, as soon as you become an Amazon partner product, like you are in the Amazon store, like
Yep.
not the Amazon where you buy
Yeah.
your toilet paper. You have a software product that's in AWS cloud. it's so amazing how much money they can drive. If you're an Amazon subscriber, you're buying Amazon services, you're buying a lot of Amazon direct services. They're compute, EC2, whatever you want, but if you're a third party and your stuff's in there, what happens is a buyer from Amazon is you get an advisor, a partner program manager. You get on the phone with them and they're like, what's your technology problem? And it seems very like it seems like they're trying to help you, but really they're salespeople. They'll go, "Oh, we have a company product. Why don't I put you in touch with them?" That's lead gen. You get in touch with them. You're an IT guy. You're like, "Oh my God, that solves my problem. That's exactly what I need. I needed a monitor on my firewall." You just go into your Amazon dashboard. You add it. It's $2 an hour. Boom. That company's got a new sale. But that's how distribution is done in the Amazon cloud. It's like they're
Yeah.
constantly selling you new services.
Right, and Google's doing that too.
Google's doing that.
Part of their cloud. Yeah.
I ran a company as a chief product officer that was doing that inside the Atlassian marketplace. We had a $50 million ARR. It was just like $50 million. We had no sales team. We just had a product inside there. So distribution's everywhere. And I feel like companies don't quite understand it.
Right. It's more of a technical sale, right? I mean, it's not. I think you don't hear people talk about it because it's a little opaque.
Yeah.
It's more CIOs, CTOs buying it.
But that's an audience.
Right.
Let's get down to distribution.
It's an audience with a budget. It's even better. They got a checkbook.
Correct.
And what's really interesting is like you think about the sheer number of I'll just say consumers that are using Claude, that are using ChatGPT every day, that are using Grok, using Gemini, for example. Gemini is probably the furthest along in terms of figuring out. They know how to monetize that because it's the same model as Google effectively. They're not doing it yet. I haven't seen it yet, or maybe we pay for it and I don't see it therefore. But I haven't logged in sort of anonymously, I guess. But these guys are going to have to figure out how to turn AI social. And then also, you're starting to see it with ChatGPT with the ads, and the ads seemingly are working. They are, effective. So that's a pretty good signal. You're talking to chat. It knows what you want. It has pretty good signal as to what your intent is.
You're talking to it.
Right, exactly.
It's it's just the best intent in the world.
Right. Google used to be the greatest intent in the world. And I'm guessing that AI now, all these chat AIs are a better form of intent.
It's remarkable. Let me just pause there for a sec. We're in our distribution segment of this thing, and this is where AI I think is going to shine. In 2023, everyone was saying, "Oh, well, it's like the chat is not going to be the product," and I'm like, I totally disagreed, because if you use Google, your Google prompt, your search box was chat. It was just bad chat. It was like you type in like,
it was one-way chat.
Yeah, it was like the worst chat in the world. It was like, I need dog food for my ailing dog. Here's 7 million links that are relevant. Do it again. Here's another million. Here's another million. It was the best product at the time, and they still have it operating. Go look at it. It's the greatest product for a certain class of people, but it's totally bewildering. And now I can just go on and actually literally engage in an intelligent conversation on dog food I need for an aging dog and really get to a place. And if they don't put an ad at the bottom of that funnel, either of these companies, it's crazy, because that's what I want. I'm actually requesting the best dog food or the best surfboard for like warm water, mushy waves, or paddle. It's like, I need that, and they should do it. That's a great product. Chat is not going away, period. And it's great because I'm engaging in an intelligent conversation on something I need.
Yeah. It's funny, just as an aside for this, again, I'm going to, I have a tendency to have a one-track mind. I'm going to go back to Tiki for a second.
Sure.
I had a conversation about some Tiki stuff, after we'd written that piece the other night with Claude, and it made reference to a couple different bars and a couple different comments. And it's interesting. And it mentioned Lost Lake in Chicago, and it mentioned a bar in sort of a famous one in London. And I stopped for a second. I said, when is your training data? What are you trained up to? And the answer came back January of this year of 26. So it's 3 months behind. And I said, because, Lost Lake in Chicago closed like 2 or 3 years ago. And the one in London closed last August. I was there the last week it was open. It just happened to be, that there was the last week it was open. And I happened to be there. And so I think one of the things that Google did so well is that it's very up to date. You
Yeah.
did not get a lot of bad links. Now,
Local. You're talking about local. That's other. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
just in general, right? Like chatting with Claude that night, I was like, it's a better conversation. It's more authoritative. It gets me better, and it gave me completely bad information.
Yeah. Well, that's
And
and
I'm like, okay, so in order to really do a great bang up job of what you're talking about, which is I have an older overweight dog that needs special kibble. I actually need proper up to date information, not just authoritative sounding conversation.
I completely agree, and I feel without sort of changing my original claim, I feel like that might not actually. So what's interesting is that's probably Google's business. That's probably not Claude's business, right?
Right.
Like Claude might not, but it's like that's Google's business. And what I really miss in the web that I thought was the most tremendously important thing about the web was individuals writing blogs about their personal experience about using a product or going on travel or making food or taking care of their dog. I actually thought that Google is really great at organizing those links and saying, hey, this guy over here has written a tremendously important blog about exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
I miss that. I think that where we need to end up is like, hey, no, AIs might have read that a year ago. He's might have updated it in real time. I think that's Google's business, perhaps, but I believe that the information needs to flow to me as a person who's chatting to get to the most relevant, to find that person's blog. More importantly, we want people to be rewarded for organizing information. For example, you and I are organizing information for a certain class of business user. We're writing about it, we're reading it, we're distilling it, we're analyzing it, we're posting it. We're doing that on behalf of our listener and our reader. And then we're doing a podcast about it, so sort of have them kind of get a sit in a room with us at a lunch table and feel like they're listening, and they're developing connection. That's still tremendously important. The engines above it need to actually reward that. If we lose that, then what happens is you just end up with like this crystallized information in the storehouses that don't get updated, don't get refreshed, and they just become like stale. So distribution is still, I still think, despite all the AI rewards that we're going to get, it becomes more valuable to organizations. Period.
100%. There's no success without distribution.
Right.
And I think it's not just distribution. Is also, and I'm going to, we've talked about this a bunch. It's vertical distribution.
Yes.
It's not just broad, like broadcasting. I also played golf recently with one of the head sales guys for ABC for Disney. And, we talked about broadcasting, which is used by certain of their clients, like the Coca-Colas of the world, the beer companies of the world that just.
It's totally, yeah.
Yeah, where everyone is their customer. But, we started talking about it in the sort of the pregame show here, with, Mr. Beast and, Kim Kardashian. Like Skims is the perfect product for Kim Kardashian's audience.
And her audience.
And her audience, right? She's the right customer. She's and she's the right audience. And so if you're a fan of Kim Kardashian
or not, you just
yeah, you're
yeah.
But it fits. When I see Derek Jeter and Tiger Woods driving a Buick, it doesn't fit, right? Like there's no chance that they're driving Buicks. They were both, appeared in Buick ads. But if you see Huberman all of a sudden on his podcast talking about some sort of peptide, you're like, yeah, I see that. I get that. This is all this guy does.
It's really interesting. So it's like the distributor, Kim and Huberman, are distributing directly to their audience, meaning like they know that Buick has no audience, developed no relationship with its community, has made good products, but can't telegraph it at all. So they have to rent these other guys. And that's the problem. That is the distribution problem. And where does this fit with AI? Like, why are we talking about this? Well, it's like AI is going to give you the ability to actually manufacture audience-specific data, content, ideas that you could traffic directly to your audience. So that's why we're talking about distribution. And if you're not using it or figuring that out, you're in deeper trouble than missing AI.
Yeah, I hope to God we're doing exactly that, which is we have an audience and we're using AI to, come up with content that should be very specifically relevant to that audience. I want to throw one name out at you, and theory, which is that Larry Ellison should be the greatest venture capitalist of all time at this point. The guy owns TikTok effectively.
I mean, he is.
And he now controls Paramount and Warner. So in terms of being able to reach a mass audience of consumers, from the youngest to the oldest, from CBS, which is a geriatric TV network, all the way down.
Housebound boomers, I call it. There's a
Housebound
channel.
boomers, yeah, that's a very generous version. It's a lot of denture ads, I think, and going backwards all the way to the 11 and 12-year-olds on TikTok. This guy should, he's 83 and he looks like 60, but he's like, that guy should be able to put together a actual organization that says, I will give you money, and as part of that, I will give you distribution so your product works. And it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy with that kind of distribution. It should be almost self-fulfilling if you have a decent product.
Yeah, it's he's that the Oracle, the Ellison family is in such a unique. I think people don't really talk about them enough.
It's usually negative when they do talk about them.
It's usually negative, but I look at it. There's some definitely pernicious sort of stuff happening there as it accretes to sort of one family owner, all of that. But I could take the other side of it, saying like, what a remarkable run Larry Ellison's had. He's come up in Silicon Valley from the earliest days. He controls the database layer. Oracle's compute layer is quite profound. He's neck deep with Elon on that and owning TikTok. It's just from a business standpoint, he should be written about as like a hero. The pernicious side of it all is something that I'm not qualified to talk about, but I do see that there's some downside to that, of course. But he does own distribution. I don't know if you'll see like an Oracle TikTok that's going to move Oracle software TikTok that's going to move it at all. But I do think that he could certainly spike people's TikToks, you know what I mean, in a way, or change the algorithm. TikTok is an algorithm company. It's hard to get distribution in TikTok unless you really understand the algorithm.
But if you control the algorithm, it's very easy to insert something that will work with the algorithm.
You could write a very top of funnel sort of filter that says everyone in this list gets 0.001 more traffic, and it's done. And it's like, that's all his buddies.
Exactly.
It's a pretty high level. It's pretty easy to do. The product may change. I think the story goes, I feel like, as we wrap here, is that you have this fog of war at the very beginning, which is like all of these companies that are in AI are broadcasting significant amount of achievements with their products. Their fans are then amplifying it. So hence you get fog of war. And if you're an executive, you're like, I don't know what to do or what not to do. I think that's where we're talking about in that segment. And then I think as you kind of move down, as we looked at the next segment, was like, how do I spend? And
how do I allocate? Yeah.
How to allocate. I think we have some strong advice and counsel here, but you need to be doing something because compression's happening. And I think that we can help you there. And then on the distribution side, we've kind of broke it down into these 3 tiers. We might not have actually covered them as crispy as we wanted, but we think that direct to consumer, and that could be a business user. You could be selling direct to your business consumer. Your distribution needs to be thought of as important as your AI strategy.
I think it may be more important than your AI. So it's interesting as we're sitting here talking. I have many screens in front of my eyes here.
Yeah.
An email just pops in. So it's Lenny's newsletter, which is, Lenny's podcast, and Lenny Rachitsky. Anyway,
yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, a very well-known podcaster. And the headline says, Snapchat CEO, why distribution has become the most important moat.
Yeah,
that is the whole podcast with Evan is distribution, which is kind of funny that we're sitting here talking about it. And that's what popped in front of my eyes as you were just talking a second ago. Literally just dropped,
Yeah, I think it's, and people don't talk about it enough because they don't understand what distribution means. And they have marketing teams that just continually buy distribution because the sales teams need lead gen, right? Like, so it's a vicious cycle. You almost can't think about distribution. And when people talk about it, and I think you even mentioned that people say, wow, that's really hard. Like, yeah, you could and it's like, yeah, the most valuable part of your moat's really hard to build.
Yeah.
Are you building it? No.
Yeah.
Are you going to build it? Probably not.
I'm going to have a very serious conversation this week with the CMO of Weed Maps, right? So I'm on the board of Weed Maps, which is WM Technologies, which is one of the larger. It is the largest, effectively, cannabis data company in the world. And my question to this guy is simply, what are you doing to own your own distribution? Why aren't we doing more? What are we not trying? What have we tried? Where has it failed? Where can we
Yeah,
do more of this?
I think,
Because
yeah,
lots of ideas, but there's a market with pretty wide acceptance. 70% of Americans say it should be legal. Probably 25%, 30% probably use the products regularly. I mean, that is a lot of human beings. And you tell me where you congregate if you are a cannabis fan right now. And the answer is no, is literally like nowhere. High Times, it's gone, Leafly kind of gone,
we
et
went
cetera.
down that road a lot.
Yeah.
I think that it'd be interesting to hear what you hear is back. I think at the end of the day, and I've said this a million times when I was running Catalyst, it was like when I was running a media distribution company, you have to be thinking about your audience and what you're giving to them on a daily, weekly basis. And I think that well-tuned news organizations like an NPR, they know exactly who their audience is, and
Yes.
they know exactly what kind of meat to serve them. They don't deviate at all. They put no real opposition
I,
thought on that thing, and
I,
they do it every day.
I don't want to cut in on you, but
Yeah.
they do not serve the meat at NPR. It's all vegan, all vegan.
It's all like, but you know what I mean?
Granola.
They're experts at it. Like they know
Yes.
exactly. It's like they have
They're
to go
tofu chefs.
right. And I think companies, yeah, they're not companies. They know how to build their product really well, and they're willing to rent distribution. And I'm like, that's great, rent it, but you still need to start owning it. And that's what Andreessen Horowitz, I think, did. They rented until they owned, and now they have a really clear channel direct to consumers and their audience, and they know how to promote and I think they've done it very successfully. And I actually believe at some point Andreessen Horowitz's media could become a hit media. Like literally, like that's all people understand, that
Right.
brand, that business, and that will be quite interesting. And at that point, like it makes sense that why aren't we investors? Like someone might be like, hey, I watch the 18 channel on YouTube or wherever. It's interesting. Why aren't they investors? And it's like, yeah, they are. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yep. Yeah, I think Sequoia's, has come along now. You started to see these thought pieces come out of Sequoia on X, sort of longer form thought
yeah,
pieces.
they're
They put
getting
them
there.
out. They're getting there. Their partners are getting on more podcasts. I mean, these are the alpha dogs, in that space. And so for them to be forced almost to get out there in a way that, Mike Moritz just was not going to. He didn't need to, in all honesty. It was
No, I
just,
mean, it was a different
yeah,
time.
different time. But,
I think, I mean, I
but
remember one of my first VCs relationships that I built was a fellow named Jeff Clavier, and he was just starting to write blogs, and that was kind of the thing. And then a guy down here, a friend of mine named Mark Suster, he kind of followed that, and they became the blogging kind of VC crowd.
yeah, Fred Wilson in New York, with
Fred Wilson,
AVC,
yeah,
every day for like 10 years. I mean, it's unbelievable.
and it was remarkably powerful.
Yes.
For the audience of founders, Fred, probably the top, and Paul Graham.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were extraordinarily influential because they on their distribution channels. You know what I mean? It's not their primary business, but and I think today for the younger listener, that's G Stack, Gary Tan, and what he's doing. You're watching them. They're building distribution. If people don't understand what we've been talking about, Gary Tan and what he's doing with his podcast and what he's doing with Y Combinator, he's building distribution.
Yeah, the All In podcast, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it looks Gurley stopped with with Gerstner, but that podcast was great. And,
Great.
Yeah, really.
Ours is little and it's great. People have told us. I've heard people say, "Hey, I really like what you guys are doing."
Yeah.
And so I think that
My mom loves it. It's great.
Huh?
My mom loves it.
Your mom
She's deeply into AI at 90.
All right. We're up. We got to wrap this thing out. It's Sunday morning. It's always great to get on the pod with you. And I think we're going to start trying to figure out how to get some new voices here with us. It's our 5th one, and we're aiming to get to 10 as quickly as 5 more weeks will get us there.
Exactly.
And we're really stoked to have the listeners follow us, and we'll just keep going. Is there any postscripts you want to throw out there?
No, I think it's an interesting compilation, and I think, like a lot of our stuff, I'm not so sure that we do reporting as much as analysis, and I think this was, a reasonable regurgitation and analysis of kind of the meta topics that are going on as opposed to just the screaming headlines, and so,
Yeah.
I'm happy putting that out. I hope people enjoy it as much as I enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think this is the one of the podcasts that you can come back to in like literally 3 years and be like, yep, distribution, yep, compression in the marketplace, yep, fog of war. I don't think those themes are changing, and I think we're going to cover them continuously. But it's good seeing you. We'll talk to
I've
you
seen you.
soon.
Alright.